Hey everyone, it's Miles from ICOMOS and the Monuments Toolkit, and today we have a special episode of the Monumental Project and a new concept we want to introduce. Here at ICOMOS, we are intentional about highlighting the current events and statues that are filling the cultural preservation discourse of today. It is our role to provide listeners with stories and narratives that show them what is really happening with monuments of oppression. This won't stop for as long as we're around. However, we also understand that there are amazing nonprofits and community action groups that have been doing this work for years. Organizations that have made it their mission to address issues in this space, as well as preserving the history of their communities through intentional preservation. These are the organizations that have paved the way for the Monuments Toolkit, and it would be a shame not to highlight them in some way. So that's what we're doing on the Monumental Project. Every other month, in between our narrative episodes, we'll be sitting down with one organization in the cultural preservation or activism space. We want to hear their stories, how they feel about the current situations at hand, and what they plan on doing in the future. It's these kinds of conversations that continue to uplift this field for the better. Earlier this month, we sat down with Wells Todd of Take 'Em Down Jacksonville. Wells Todd is a native New Yorker and has been involved in the class struggle since the late 1970s. He has lived in Jacksonville for the past 21 years and has traveled to Cuba twice and Grenada in 1982 during its revolutionary period with the National Black Independent Political Party. Over the past 5 years, he has been the leader of Take 'Em Down Jacks, working to remove Confederate monuments, statues, bridge names, and street names that celebrate white supremacy. We hope you enjoy the episode. And as always, if you have any questions or want to share your own opinion, feel free to email us at monumental@usicomos.org. Here we go. So just to start, can you provide an introduction of yourself and, for the people who don't know, a snapshot summary of the Take 'Em Down movement?
Yes, my name is Wells Todd. I've been living in Jacksonville, Florida since 2001. I'm a longtime activist, basically helped put this campaign together to have these statues removed. As most of us know and understand, that these statues were put up to let the African American community know in the South who was in charge. The majority of them were put up well after the Civil War. As a matter of fact, they were put up after the bloody overthrow of Reconstruction in America, which we never really talk about. And they were put up to celebrate the return of white supremacy.
Right.
So that's one of the reasons why I became involved in this campaign to get these statues removed.
Thank you. So was activism and public demonstrations something that you always gravitated towards, or was this something that you kind of discovered recently?
No, I've always been, I go back to the 70s, actually.
Wow.
I am, I'm 75 years old. I turn 76 next month. So I've been active since the 70s. I guess I owe my activism actually to Brother Malcolm X. I was born and raised in New York, and I've been involved in a lot of campaigns.
Right. Interesting. Thank you. So can you explain the process of trying to make a change when it comes to monuments and statues? I've spoken to other organizations and I've gathered that there usually isn't a step-by-step protocol, but what are some key procedures that have to happen in order to possibly see change?
Well, here in Jacksonville, what we have been doing is having rallies, educationals, just general meetings, and also approaching the city council. We have been, this has been a long struggle. We have been at this for the past 5 years. People, entering this struggle, they need to know that it's going to take some time. There are forward motions and backward motions to having these statues removed. So we have gone through actually 2 city council administrations so far. Some people have been timed out, and some have been voted out, and others have been voted in. But we're still basically fighting the same fight.
Right.
We live in the Deep South. A lot of people call Jacksonville, Florida, Southern Georgia.
Yeah.
Is it just across the border?
Hmm.
And so, we have a history here. We have a history of the Klan. We have a history of, just outright racist tactics to make sure that African Americans don't obtain control. And so it's an uphill struggle. And the more we protest and the more we organize, the closer we get to having these statues removed.
Understood. Yeah. It's an uphill battle. That's what I've been hearing a lot from activists and organizations when it comes to being in this space. It's all
Yes.
about counting the big moments and the little moments.
Right.
Right. How connected is Take 'em Down Jacksonville with the other Take 'em Down branches? Whether it's in Memphis or New Orleans, is there any synergy between the hubs, or is most of the work local and community based?
We have we're connected with those who have been struggling and had success in New Orleans, and we've even had some connections with people in Alabama and abroad. So yeah, there are connections, and we hope to broaden those connections, and we hope to also continue to get the word out nationally about what's happening here in Jacksonville. I can tell you, we had a city council meeting just last night, and it was very interesting because there's a right-wing group here that is trying to make itself look like a caring group that wants to compromise, and they're anything but.
Right.
Recently, this was last year, we fought to get the names of schools changed here in Jacksonville. And some of the same people who were actively involved in trying to keep that from happening are actively involved in trying to keep these two statues up.
Wow. And just for clarification, what are some of the statues in Jacksonville that you're trying to actively take down?
We have a statue. We have a pillar that's 62 feet high in what is now James Weldon Johnson Park, which used to be called Hemming Park. And Hemming was a soldier and landowner who dedicated and gave basically a statue of a soldier, one of those statues that was factory made,
right,
to send out to the states that ordered them. And it was supposed to be him at the top of this 62-foot tower. Now, the mayor removed the soldier, but the tower still stands, and there's an inscription at the base of that tower that says this is a Confederate monument. It gives the dates of the Confederacy. So that's one statue, one monument. The other is this huge statue to the women of the Confederacy. It's a woman reading to her two children. And when you look at the history of how African-American men were basically shut out of the political system, and one of the tools that was used was white women claiming that Black men had sexually molested them or spoke out of turn to them or looked at them. You can go down the line of reasons.
Right.
But they were actually lynched. And we have to understand also that that statue does not represent the enslaved African women who were raped and forced into this labor that we call slavery.
Of course.
So we're demanding that statue be removed as well.
Yeah, speaking about some of those opposing organizations, as an activist organization that's centered on taking action against symbols of white supremacy and antiquated representations of history, how do you respond to individuals and organizations who say that taking down these monuments is quote unquote erasing history in some way? What is your usual defense against that kind of
Yeah,
logic and rhetoric?
that's a very interesting thing that they keep saying. The history most of us learn is a false narrative,
Right.
that romanticizes slavery and centers white supremacy. And this narrative was actually pushed and done greatly by the United Daughters of the Confederacy. They had a free hand in rewriting the history of the South. They controlled the narrative in the history books. They were responsible for putting up most of these statues. At the time these statues were put up, each one of them had a spokesperson who was a noted citizen, white citizen, sometimes a mayor, sometimes a judge, and the speeches basically were dog whistle speeches, and they all pointed to white supremacy and how they were going to continue to oppress the African American community.
Right.
So when we look at this thing about history, and it's interesting because most of the people who spoke out in favor of keeping the statues up have been people who were educated from these books, people my age. It's really interesting to hear them get up and actually quote some of the misguided propaganda that was put out by the Daughters of the Confederacy. When I say the Daughters of the Confederacy had full reign over the history, I mean they censored anything that was negative about the Confederacy, and they would take it out of the history books altogether. Wow. So you'll never find a history book, a Southern history, a book written in the South that says anything negative about the Confederacy. I, as a matter of fact, have gone out to a book depository here, and I searched the stacks and actually found some old history books that we used, and I purchased them. And looking through them, you can get a sense of how people were conditioned by the propaganda that was put out by the Daughters of the Confederacy. We have a chapter of the Daughters of the Confederacy right here in Jacksonville, who were trying to get to come forward to basically apologize for what they've done. I want to say this. One of the issues we continue to have, and a lot of people don't want to talk about, is the fact that what the Daughters of the Confederacy did, and what the Confederacy did, and what Robert E. Lee did, and those other leaders, was to dehumanize the African American community. And the Supreme Court came down with decisions that did the same thing. So we're still dealing with people's ideas that African Americans are somehow not of the same species as white people, and so when I say to people, well, would you put a statue of Adolf Hitler outside of a concentration camp in Germany or in Hungary or Poland or whatever? They can't see the similarity, because they can't see that the mass destruction that was done for almost 300 years to Africans and African Americans is the same disrespect for humanity that was carried out against the Jewish population. So when we look at this and we get down, to really discussing this, that has to be understood. Are we being seen as human beings, all of us, as humanity, or are we still being seen as separate and unequal? And we have some politicians right here. We had a Black politician who actually said, and this goes to the point of internalized racism, she said she was happy that they enslaved us.
Wow.
Yeah, she said, well, if we hadn't been enslaved, we'd still be in Africa praying to a tree. You see, that's how deep this internalized racism and the apparatus that continues to be driven in this country regarding race.
Wow, that is heavy. Yeah, it's a lot to unpack. It's not just one issue. There's a lot of layers to this stuff that, like you said, it comes with the internalized issues and the stuff on the outside. It's a lot to grapple with at once.
Right.
Man, shifting gears a bit, what has been your most memorable experience with the Take 'em Down Jacksonville movement?
Most memorable, I think, holding the second Take 'em Down conference here in Jacksonville.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that because, to me, education is the key.
Right.
And our governor is Governor DeSantis, and anybody looking at what he is about and what he's doing can understand that one of the reasons he's on this campaign is because of people actually finding out the truth about not only the statues, not only the reasons for taking these statues down, but history in general. And so, to me, one of the significant things was that conference we had here.
Right.
Because a lot of people turned out, and a lot of people became aware and got a deeper understanding about race and racism in this country and the history of racial segregation. Like I said before, the overthrow of Reconstruction, and the almost 300 years of enslavement.
Is this conference still ongoing? Is there a date that it'll be planned for in the future?
Yeah, we had a minor one on Zoom because of the pandemic.
Right.
So we haven't had one in person since that started.
How important is community involvement when it comes to fixing public spaces? Some people, think that there isn't much that can be done, but as an organization focused on this issue, what can you say to people who want to do something in their neighborhood but don't exactly know how?
Yeah, I think it's most important. I think community activism is most important for all of our issues that we are facing. The more people are organized, the more people flex their muscles, the more people turn out in the streets, the more things get done. If we look at the history of the United States, and we really begin to dig into it, we see that nothing that working people and people of color have gained has ever been granted without a struggle. Mm. No, there's never been a single politician who has just said one day, we're going to pass this bill and that's going to be the end of it. No, it was years and decades of struggle and organizing and building a movement. We look at the labor movement, we look at the women's movement, we look at the farm workers movement. It's always been a movement that brings about change in America, because the people who benefit from our suffering, have the money to maintain the oppression and exploitation.
Right.
We have the numbers, and it's always about organizing the numbers. Next month, I believe there is a march that's going to be in DC, the Poor People's Campaign.
Right.
And that's growing. And, I would invite everybody who can get there to get there on the 18th, because that's what we need. We need to build a movement. If we look at the situation and you put the statues in the middle of it, and you draw a line around the statues, and then the spokes of a wheel come out, you can pretty much see that those who support maintaining these statues and the propaganda about maintaining these statues goes along with denying women's rights. It goes along with not pushing for police reform and police accountability. It goes to denying a woman's right to choice. It goes to not paying attention and not caring about the housing situation. So you'll see that all of these things are connected. So when we campaign about removing the statues, we're also campaigning to defend the rights of the LGBTQ community, the rights of the women's march, and now the rights of workers to fight for and get a decent minimum wage,
Right.
The right for unions to be able to be formed. So it's a combination of things, you know, and it goes right back to the economic and political structure that actually is the same now as it was when they put these statues up.
What are the easiest and quickest things that someone can do to help the Take 'em Down Jacksonville and the Take 'em Down movement at large?
What we're trying to do here is make what's happening here as public as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a bicentennial that's coming up next month. Actually, it's going to be celebrated on June 11th here in Jacksonville. And we're trying to get the word out nationally that Jacksonville is going to have this bicentennial that is basically celebrating in part the Confederacy. And at the meeting last night, at the city council meeting last night, we spoke to this issue and the fact that there will be a public response to the fact that they are having a bicentennial in a town where for the past 50 years after consolidation, none of the promises that were made to the African-American community have been carried out, including the removal of the statues. Right now, we have a record of 7 lynchings that took place here in Jacksonville.
Wow.
And one of them, his body was dragged through the town and laid in the shadow of the Confederate statue that's in James Weldon Johnson Park. And so we see that direct tie between white supremacy and lynching. And so what I'm hoping that people will do is call the media, put out the word about what's happening here, what's going to happen here on June 11th. And they can contact me directly. My telephone number is 904-477-8979. And we are on Instagram and Facebook. Take 'em Down Jacks on Facebook and Take 'em All Down Jacks on Instagram. This past week, myself along with about 24 other people took a trip to Montgomery, Alabama, where the museum and memorial to lynching victims is, organized and created by the Equal Justice Initiative and Brian Stevenson.
Right.
And people should go, if they ever get a chance to go to this museum and memorial, because it is exactly what this country needs, in the sense that if you want to really know the true history of racial segregation, slavery, and what's happening right now, you need to go to this museum. And I think once you go, it's basically a life-changing experience in the sense of the knowledge that you'll gain from doing that. So those are some of the things that people can do. And if you have a statue in your town, or statues or monuments that you would like to see come down, please get in touch with us, and we can basically form some type of coalition group and support each other.
Wow, that's powerful stuff. Thank you for reaching out that olive branch to people. I'm sure our listeners, a lot of them have monuments and statues that they don't think too kindly of in their communities. So having somebody like yourself and an organization like Take 'em Down Jacksonville as a resource means a lot. So thank you.
Thank you again. I very rarely get this opportunity to be able to reach out to people out beyond our borders here.
Of course. And finally, this is a question that we ask all of our guests. How do we correctly address monuments of oppression?
Monuments of oppression have been seen as monuments to honor those who fought and died for the Confederacy. I would like people to take another look at what that actually means. The southern states that seceded from the Union seceded so that they could maintain the enslavement and exploitation of Africans.
Right.
We have to understand that this secession was a treasonous act. It wasn't that these people just wanted to break away and have their own economy and whatnot. They had their own president, their own vice president. They had their own money. They had their capital. And one of the things that was made clear was a speech given. It was a cornerstone speech. And it was given by, I believe, the vice president of the Confederacy. And the main thing that he said in that speech, and I'm sort of paraphrasing it, the main thing he said was, there's a great truth. And that truth is that the Negro is inferior to the white man.
Wow.
And his position is to serve the white man. And if you go through the documents of every single state that seceded, it basically says the same thing. And so I want people to look at this in the light of how that affects us today. How does this treasonous act that took so many lives, and after the overthrow of chattel slavery, we had a second wave of slavery in the South called sharecropping, and the maintaining of white control by legalized court-ordered segregation, which threw this country into a dark period for over 100 years, which saw the great migration out of the South of African Americans running from this terror campaign that was carried out against us. So I want people to see this as a new understanding of a history where the narrative was to romanticize slavery and to center white supremacy as the main thing that we should look at, because we're still dealing with it today. I think that, we need to relook at and understand this hate and the reason for it and who benefits from it. So once again, people want to get involved if they have a statue or whatever in their town, and it's been hard for them to, get eyes on it and to get people to understand, why this is happening and why it happened and why we still have these things up. Feel free to get in touch with us, and we can work together on moving this thing forward.
Thank you for listening to the podcast. We'd like to thank the Andrew Mellon Foundation, the entire U.S. ICOMOS team, and all of our listeners around the world. We at the United States Committee of the International Council of Monuments and Sites are building the Monument Relocation, Removal, and Reinterpretation Toolkit with a website and mobile app aimed to educate, guide, and listen to the American people. The conversations created on the Monumental Project are just one piece of what U.S. ICOMOS is doing to correctly address American history. With maps, case studies, resource pages, and a lot of great features on the way, be sure to check out the Monuments Toolkit for more information on how you can make a difference. You won't be disappointed. We have some great stuff coming. An essential part of the Monumental Project are the opinions and perspectives from our listeners. At the end of the season, we'll be recapping what we've learned and gained from analyzing this topic, and we would love to make all of you a part of it. If you'd like to share your thoughts on today's subject matter, feel free to email us at monumental@usicomos.org. We would love to hear your thoughts. Tune in next month as we take time to hear from the activists and community members who made history years ago. And as always, I'm your host, Miles Ezilo. We'll be back soon.